What's up, guys? So, hey, we are wrapping up our series Paradox tonight, and we are going to kick off our new series, Just Breathe, next week. That's going to cover topics like healing, anxiety, hit on topics like depression and forgiveness. So it's going to be something that I think all of us deal with to one extent or another. I hope that you'll come out and bring a friend. It's going to be a great time to just dive into what God's Word has to say on those topics. I'm excited about it. But tonight we're finishing up. So Matthew chapter 5 is where we're going to be. If you have a Bible, I invite you to grab it. And or if you're on your phone, you want to pull up scripture on your phone to read along with me. And of course, it'll be on the slides behind me as well as we track through this together. But Jesus is going to give several, really a list of paradoxical statements, one after another, as he starts to answer this question. And I think it's a question that all of us ask and all of us desire, is that we would want happiness in our lives. We would want to live the, quote, blessed life. But what if, the question that we're going to be answering, what if happiness and what if the blessed life is found on a different path than what the world teaches and than what some of us thought? And so we're going to be diving into that this evening. But to set up where we're going, so whenever I was in college, we had our capstone class. So everyone pretty much has a capstone class, the class that it's the weed out class. The class is going to be more difficult than most of the other classes that we take. And this professor was known to not be an easy professor. And so when I finally took it, the class was called Doctrines, where you study systematic theology and things like that. And you had very difficult tests in this class where there was no ABCD. It was, here's a question, tell me everything you know about this. Anybody, you take classes like that, and it's just you either know it or you don't. And so this guy comes in day one, and you're thinking it's syllabus week, right? So syllabus week, you're thinking it's more of a chill week. Not always. So this guy comes in, and he has this stack of syllabuses in his hand, and he puts them down, and he's like, hey, if you want a syllabus, you can grab one and read it later. I'm not going to just unpack this for you guys. You guys have eyes and can read. But here's my first point. I hope you have some notes out, ready to take some notes. And he clicks to his first point and just starts going. And I'm like pulling out my laptop. I'm like, oh my goodness, okay. And he's one of those guys that he would walk into class as soon as the bell was ringing, and he started teaching. He was just intense, man. And then as he was walking out, there were several times that he would be teaching, and he would grab his coat that he was wearing, and he would start to put it back on, and he would literally be walking outside of the room right before the bell rings for us to go to our next period or whatever. And he would be like, and so that's my last point. And ring, the bell would go off, and he would be the first one out of the room. And we're going this guy is intense. He doesn't stop. Well, one of my friends also took this class, and he took it another semester. And this semester, he shared a story about what happened to him. And so Dr. Smith is his name. And so Dr. Smith decided that he was going to give a test like he always did. But he said, hey, guys, I just want to let you know that this next test that you take is going to be a difficult one. And they were like, okay, so, and actually the guy who shared the story with me, it's Corbin Young, who's the FCA chaplain at Texas Tech for men's athletics. And so he shares the story with me. He was like, yeah, so he said, you need to start studying. So I started studying really hard. Everyone studied that was in his friend group. And so it comes time for the test. And he bombs the test. And this is capstone class. This is if you don't get a good grade in this class, it's why are you even getting the degree kind of deal. And not only did he bomb the test, but everybody else bombed the test. And so literally every person he talked with failed. And so they're calling the deans of the school. They're trying to talk with anybody they know that has a position of authority to try to figure out he can't just fail all of us. That's not okay. Anybody ever taken a test where everybody in the class failed? So y'all kind of know the pain that I'm talking about. But literally every person failed. And so word gets to the professor, and he actually says, okay, guys, I want to meet you at the stairs of this building. And got in contact with them and says 7 or 8 at night or something like that. So they all show up. And he's at the top of the stairs, and they come to the bottom, and it's like a true stare down, if you will, because stairs there. Okay. And so he says, I wanted to share something with you. He said, all of you failed this test. And they're like, no duh, Sherlock. What else do you have for us? And he goes, and I also want to let you know something, that I actually took this test as well, and I got a 100. And they're like, okay. And he goes, well, and here's why I think that's important for you to know. And he actually did this. He said, if you would be willing to, I will give you my test grade and I will take yours, and we can trade. And then he started to share about the grace of God. And what was really interesting, some people actually got more frustrated. Some people were like, no, I'm going to do it, But many of them, Corbin said, were more than willing to come in and make that exchange because they knew that they could never do anything on their own to pass that test. Now, here's why I share that, because Jesus, right out the gate in Matthew chapter 5, as he teaches the beginning of him talking on the Sermon on the Mount, he's going to say, here is where the blessed life is found. Here is where true happiness is found. In 5:1, it says, seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So blessed are the poor in spirit. This word blessed is actually the Greek word makarios. And this word means fortunate, or to be well off, or to be blessed, or to actually be truly happy. Some people translate it and say happy would actually be the best translation of this word. So happy are the poor in spirit. And you go, how can being poor in spirit be the starting point of being happy in your life? And the point is your blessing will come whenever you bring your nothing. Your blessing will come when you bring your nothing. It says, blessed are the poor in spirit. When you realize that you bring nothing to the table, that's whenever you accept that Jesus took the test too and passed. And so I fail whenever it comes to living up to God's standard of holiness. But Jesus says, I took the test too, and you can accept my grade. I fell on trusting God, like over and over again. I hear, and we're going to talk about that even tonight. I failed to do this so often in my life. And Jesus says, I took the test too, and I passed, and you can have my grade. And over again, we could share, but you get the riches of God when you admit that you are in the place of need. And this is the starting point of living the blessed life. The poor in spirit, they are in this position with open hands to receive from God. So Andrew Murray, theologian, said this. He said, here is the path to life. Down, lower down. Just as water always seeks and fills the lowest place, so the moment God finds men abased and empty, his glory and power flow in to exalt and to bless. It's this position of receiving. It's like the lowest place that the water, when it rains, is always going to go to the lowest place first. And when you are in that place of being poor in spirit, you are at that low place to receive the eternal well, the eternal spring, the eternal blessing of God in your life, and start to be filled up with that. It's a very unique perspective that he's teaching here. But he's saying when you bring your nothing, that's when blessing will actually come. And I've seen this happen over and over again. And maybe you've seen this as well. But people often, they finally turn to God when they come to the end of themselves. Like that's something that I've noticed over and over and over again. They'll have something that'll happen that'll cause them to finally come to the end of themselves, wake up and see that God had something better the entire time. I'm thinking of the student that I met with just a couple weeks ago. And she was sharing about how she was trying to find satisfaction and fulfillment in relationships, and after relationship, and swiping right, and all that stuff. And she said, I went into that and I've been stuck in that. And she said, and I feel shame, and I want God's forgiveness, and I want God's way. I want to go God's way with my life. How do I do that? And we had a discussion. She was finally ready to go God's way. I'm thinking about the guy that I met with not that long ago, that he's a guy that's in a lot of organizations, and in most of them, he's a leader in those organizations. So he's just got that quality about him that people naturally gravitate towards him as an individual. And he's also in a degree plan that pretty much is going to promise him a lucrative career. He's going to make plenty of money, and he knows all of this, and he's going, but man, I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's resonating deeply within me because I feel empty in all of those pursuits. Man, does God have something more? And they're in this place where they're at the end of themselves, ready to find what God has for them. To be poor, it's this picture of being bankrupt. To be spiritually bankrupt is actually one of the best places that we could be. And this is true in our sin and in our salvation, finally coming to the Lord. But it's also true more than that, I think, man. I think it applies to our lives in general. Like, there's a lot of people I speak with that, man, they're struggling with mental health issues like depression, this weight that we carry, man. And I wouldn't want, and like I've shared with my anxiety, I wouldn't want to carry that. I wouldn't have chosen that. And I know many people struggling with depression and just that numbness that you are dealing with and that darkness that seems to just drown out the light if you don't really cling to it. But man, what if your depression can actually be used to point you to greater dependence upon God? Like, what if those low places in our lives can be used? Now, God in this broken, what if he's so good that in this broken, chaotic, messed up world and all the things we deal with, that he can actually use those things and he can point us to greater dependence upon him? Like, what if great loss can be used to point us to the greatest gain in our lives? So for me, I was in a place just a few years ago when I was just like going through a spiritual desert is the only way I can think to describe it. Like, I was just bone dry spiritually, struggling. It wasn't the anxiety thing at this point. It was just like I was like, God, I want to share your word like passionately and effectively, and I feel like nothing's hitting me. I was like, God, I'm not sensing you, and I feel like, man, I just have nothing left to give. And I was trying to do everything I could to stir my heart, and man, I felt like just nothing was working at this time and season in my life. And there's a couple of tickets to Passion Conference, large conference for college students, Christian college conference. And as a college pastor, I thought, man, I know that I'm not a college student, but I think it would be really cool to see these college students engage with what God has for them, and maybe God will stir my heart. And there was like 40,000 at this specific year. And so in Lubbock, I thought that was kind of neat because there's about 40,000 plus students in Lubbock. And so when you combine all the schools together, just over 40,000. So like I thought that was really cool to be able to see that and think that all of these students, and like it'd be like all the students in Lubbock worshiping Jesus. And I was watching this happen, and I was listening and taking notes myself as they were going through their Bible studies and teachings and things like that. But there was this moment as I was just frustrated. I think it was day 2 of the conference, and I was there, and Mosaic was leading worship, and they were doing their song Tremble, which has been a breakthrough song for a lot of people here at The Way. Like, God has used that song to bring people to a moment with God in a very unique way. But I was listening to that song, and in my heart, I was just saying, God, like, I've got nothing but crumbs to give you right now. And I was frustrated. And in that moment, God spoke to me as they were singing that song, and he just reminded me of the boy with the loaves and the fish that God uses to bless. And it's in John chapter 6, starting in verse 5, like God just brought this to mind in my heart. And it says, lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat? And he said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. And Philip answered, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. God, I don't have enough. There's nothing but crumbs. Might as well be nothing at all. He's going, there's not enough, God. And then one of his disciples, I think this is a really funny moment, by the way. If you just like play this out, there's 5,000 people and there's no food at all. And one of the disciples, Andrew's like, hey, bro, he said to him, hey, there's this boy over here. And he's like, I think I got something. So they're trying to find a solution how to feed these people. And he said, there's a boy who has 5 barley loaves. And he's like, he's got 2 fish. He's like, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board. We don't got enough. Like, what are you talking about? This kid's got there's 5,000 people here, and we're going to give a couple of fish and be like, hey, guys, good luck. I mean, golly, talk about being a fish out of water, right? And so it's crazy. Like, they're going like, how am I going to find enough? And Jesus in that moment says, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in the place. No idea why they include that detail. So the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And as I thought about this passage that so many of us have probably heard growing up, Jesus just spoke to me and said, man, would you just bring me your crumbs? Like, Travis, when you feel like you're not enough, know that I am enough. Like, I am your enough. Like, what would it be like for you to give Jesus your crumbs? You go, God, I don't have anything. I don't have much to give at all. I feel like I have nothing to give. God says, bring me your nothing and watch what I do with it. And my life has been a testimony of bringing my nothing to God and watching him move in people's hearts and minds and lives. We baptized a guy last semester. What is going on? Last service. We baptized a guy last service, and after he got baptized, came up to me, gave me a hug and said, man, like, God powerfully impacted my life through sermons that you have given. And that blows my mind because I just wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Lord. But I've been giving my nothing and watching what God does with it. And it's not just me, man, it's for you. You go, I don't have enough, I'm not enough. Jesus is your enough. And he's saying, would you bring your nothing? Watch me touch it and watch what I do with it. Will you come to the end of yourself? Will you watch God take the crumbs and bless it? Man, bringing your nothing is where blessing is found. And then continuing on in the same vein, he says this. He goes on and says, blessed are those who mourn. So the poor in spirit, and then those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And the next point is this: you must be broken to be blessed. You want to know where the happy life is found? It begins in the state of brokenness. You would think it would be the opposite. You must be whole to be blessed. Like going to Barnes & Noble, going to the self-help book section, you're never going to see 5 ways to be broken. Like that's, and now you're like, get me that one, bro. I want that book. But this is what Jesus is saying. It's so backwards if you just think about it. But he's saying, no, listen, this is actually where life is found. This word mourn is the greatest or the strongest word for like grieving and mourning in the Greek language. It was the word that was used for people that had lost a loved one as they were hurting over the losing of the person that they loved. And you go, why is this blessing? Because, man, when you're broken over your sin and you're broken over this world, you cry out to God and you start to see God move in a powerful way. Martin Luther, who was a major person of influence in the Reformation, he was said to have a note in his pocket whenever he passed away. And in his pocket was found this note that said, "This is true. We are all beggars before God." Something that is true about beggars is this: beggars cry out. They cry out to God. Like, have you cried out? Sometimes in our pride, we decide, man, I'm not going to cry out. Sometimes in our fear, what does this mean for my life? I'm scared. Sometimes we don't cry out. We stay silent. But would you cry out, man, whenever I surrendered my life back to Jesus? Every single night that this guy was preaching, it was just like God was breaking through to me, and I was not inwardly mainly, but also outwardly just crying, tears flowing from my face, saying, God, I cannot believe that you would take me back. I was blown away that God would take me back, even after the things that I had said directly to him, saying I wanted nothing to do with him. But he continued to pursue me. And man, it was like this moment, like God was breaking me in the best way possible. Because like the way that sin breaks you and the way that God breaks you, it's so different. Like when sin breaks you, it leads to a shattering in your life. When God breaks you, it leads to a molding and a mending and a healing in your life. Like you could say it like this, like sin's breaking breaks you, but God's breaking leads to breakthrough. It does. Like sin's breaking, it will break you and shatter you, but God's breaking, it will lead to breakthrough in your life. And what if somebody here tonight, what if God has breakthrough for you? And I've seen so many people experience breakthrough with Jesus. Are you broken over your sin? There's a guy that I sat down with many times, and he had been in discussions with me as we had these talks as other guys were sharing about getting free from pornography. And as we were talking, he said that I just stayed silent and I held it to myself. Because I said, man, have you shared this with anybody? And he goes, no, I've not talked to anybody about this. And he said, but I'm so tired of fighting this myself, and I want to be free. And man, and him taking that step to cry out to God, man, that's the start to freedom. Would you cry out to God like that? There's comfort that comes in the crying out. And he left, and he said, like as he left, he said, I feel less heavy in my soul as I'm walking out even now, starting the fight against his addiction. Man, are you broken over your sin? Have you cried out to God? You can. And you can see where comfort is found is in the crying out. But it's not only are you broken over your own sin, but are you broken over the condition of this world? Like to mourn is to be broken as we look at this world and all the struggle in it. There's another leader that I met with just a few weeks ago, and she has a deep passion for missions and is strongly considering missions as like living overseas the rest of her life. And at least she's been on several mission trips already. And there's a story behind her heart for missions, going across the world and sharing the gospel with people, especially those where many of them do not know Jesus at all. Her dad passed away, and her dad was Muslim when he passed away, and to her knowledge did not know God. And as we talked, she talked about how, man, and with just crying, saying like it hurts so much, thinking that it's very likely everyone's going to spend somewhere for eternity, and it's very likely that he's not with Jesus. And as we were talking, she said, it just hurts my heart so much. And I said, man, I think you're actually feeling the heart of God, because God breaks over the condition of this world. Like that is what caused Jesus. He saw all the brokenness and chaos. And man, we can all agree that there's some sad things that happen in our world today and on so many different levels. And Jesus sees all that, and that's what caused him to leave heaven, come to earth, so he could die in our place, so we could have another way made by the power of his resurrection, so we could live a new life and go a new way. He says, like, I offer this to you because he's broken over the condition of this world. And then are we broken over the world? Comfort comes. There's a comfort that comes as you are starting to bring healing to this world in the name of Jesus as a vessel. Man, I pray that we would do that we'd bring healing, like our hurting would actually lead to healing in us, but also through us as we are vessels for God, which leads us to the next point. As Jesus continues to unpack where the blessed life is found, where the truly happy life is found, he says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The blessed life is a life that is a vessel for God. You want to have the blessed life? This word meek is the picture of a stallion or a horse under the control of the master by a bit in its mouth. And so it's this power, this strength under the control of a master. And living meek before God, what that means is that we are living under God's control in our life. It's our strength under his control. And man, it's under God's control that we will not miss our purpose. Man, we all want to live on purpose and for purpose. And man, you cannot miss your purpose whenever you are living on mission with Jesus. That's how you guarantee to not miss it. Live on mission under the control of Jesus, under the authority of Jesus in your life. It says that they are going to inherit the earth, is what this tells us. Like a Christian's inheritance, it's guaranteed and unstoppable. This is really good news for us because this helps us to live in peace instead of anxious striving like so many people in our world. There's just anxiety everywhere as we feel like it's all on us. There was a leader here at the Way, was waiting on getting his test scores to see if he got into medical school. And so also he had only applied to Texas Tech medical school, and it was like Tech medical school or bust. So talk about like stressful situation. He's sitting there waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks to get the answer. And man, it's in that waiting period that you start to find out how much you actually trust God. And all of us go through the waiting period. Like maybe like him, you're waiting on getting the test result back. Maybe you're waiting to see if that relationship that you think you might or might not be in, like you're like stressed out about that. The waiting period of dating. There's so many times and seasons that we find ourselves in this zone where we're waiting and we're challenged. We're challenged in the waiting on whether we are truly going to trust God or not. But man, to live meek is simply this, is to live with that childlike trust in the Lord. And my daughters do this with me, but it's just that classic picture of the kid jumping off of something high to them into their father's arms. And like right now, my daughter Cassie, just yesterday, I was throwing her on the bed, and then she stands up and she just jumps. And she'll jump if I turn around, like Carrie calls my name. She's like, ready or not? And she like gets the running. She's like, woo, and just jumps in. I'm like, oh my gosh. Luckily, I have not dropped her yet. But we see that picture, and there's just something it's so innocent and beautiful in that, because it's like from the jumping and the space in between the catching is the trusting. And for us, like we feel like we must live in that leap. When we are in that waiting period, we got to live in the leap of faith. And we're jumping off, and God is saying, listen, I've not dropped you yet, and I'm not going to drop you now. Will you trust me when you feel like you're in midair? I'm going to catch you. This is how we live meek, knowing that God is going to catch us and lead our lives in the right direction. And so there's another picture, though, that I think about whenever I think about meekness, just being under the control of God, and this definition of strength under control is I think about a soldier underneath the authority of his commander. And what does this look like for a Christian? What this looks like for a Christian is this: send me, Lord, and I will go. Send me, and I'll go. And man, I pray that we would be willing to say that to God. God, will you send me? I want to go wherever you want to send me to go. I texted somebody this week. She's in her first year of teaching. And I just said, hey, happy birthday. It was her birthday. Thankful for you and the woman of God that you are. And then I just said, you are a minister disguised as a teacher. And I just pray that would be true. Like, she is sent out by God to minister as a teacher, and that is definitely true for her. I pray that would be true for all of us. That whatever you are going into, like whatever organization that you are in, that you would actually be there as the light of Jesus, disguised as the person that's just in the organization like everybody else is. And sure, you truly enjoy the organization, but there is a deeper meaning to everything that you do, because you know that God has sent you out to go and share his light with this world, bringing healing to the world in Jesus' name. This is what we are to do. So whatever organization, whatever degree you go into, whatever career that you end up in, would you go out and say, send me, Lord, I'll go. I want to go in your name. I want to be meek. I want to be under your control in my life. And would you be willing to pray that? This is where happiness is found. Man, when we trust, when we are confident in God's control of our lives. Are you? Are you confident in the control of God in your life? And then the last sentence and last verse that we're going to unpack from Jesus is verse 6. It says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. man, you're blessed whenever you hunger for what satisfies. And we hear this over and over and over again. But man, the Lord satisfies. Anybody here have a go-to food that you crave often? Like something that you're like you might be thinking about it now. So for me, I'm a big fan of steak, and anybody here heard of Las Brisas Steakhouse here in town? So in my opinion, it's the best steakhouse here in Lubbock, and I get to take my wife there. I asked the last service, I asked who all has been to Las Brisas. I literally saw 0 hands go up, and I was like, hey, that's all right. I remember being poor, broke in college as well. And now I'm poor, broken college minister. But save up to take your girl out, And so whenever we have a nice time, a nice dinner planned, I'll take her to go to Las Brisas a couple times a year. And so this one time, I love filet mignon. And normally I would say like to not get a filet mignon would be a big missed steak, you know what I'm saying? And so there it is. And so I decided I was going to take the risky move of actually getting something else. And I got the tortellini with blackened chicken. And guys, like Carrie was talking, and I have no idea what she was saying. I was just eating this food, and I was like, I was like, I need to go hug the chef. I need to go find the chef. I need to hug him, kiss him on the cheek, and say, God bless you, sir. Like, I wanted to call my mom, and I just want to say, Mom, now I understand the phrase, slap your mama good. Like, I don't know where that phrase came from, but I'm feeling that phrase right now. It was so good. And so, like, I've legitimately thought about this food. Like I've even asked Carrie, so it's like $24.99 to get the tortellini with blackened chicken on top, which is a lot of money for one entree. And so, but I'll be like, Carrie, like, how crazy would it be if I just got like that to go? And she's like, really? A steakhouse to go? $25, Travis? I was like, yeah. She's not allowed me to do that yet. But the point is, man, I think about this like it stirs. Like I'm like, man, you guys, one of y'all is going to go try the tortellini blackened chicken, and you're going to let me know how blessed you are. You're going to be like, you're right, Travis. That is where the happy life is found. I'm living the blessed life now. But the point is, man, like I was passionate and I was craving this thing, man. When it comes to Jesus, is Jesus something that you crave, someone that you crave? Is it something that is Jesus actually the passion of your life? Man, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those who are wanting to go after the life that God has for them, they are going to be the ones who are filled. Fulfillment in this life is going to be found in that place alone. Like he gives this crazy promise of a statement. So Tyler was preaching a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about Luke chapter 9, verse 23 through 25, and he was saying to gain life, you actually have to lose your life. And here's something that's just simply a fact, like you lose yourself in your passion. And as he was preaching that, I thought about the importance of that specific scripture in my own life. See, that verse, that reference, and the passage that goes with that was actually what was listed on my groom's cake at my wedding. If I had a life verse, that would be it. Luke 9, 23 through 25, when you want to find life, then give it over to the Lord. And I see this as this great blessing. Like, why would you want to gain the whole world but lose your soul when God has so much more for your life? And as I was hearing him just preach that, I started to think in my own heart, like, God, are you still, like, am I still passionate for you in that way? And I thought about, like, whenever I was in college, we had one of those discussions that you kind of have, late night discussions, just friends talking, and maybe you've had something along these lines, but someone said, okay, so, hey, money is no object. Like, you have all the money in the world, what do? And everyone went around and talked about vacations and all these things and things that they would want to do. Got to me, I was like, tortellini with blackened chicken every day. No, that's not what I said. I hadn't eaten tortellini with blackened chicken yet. But I said, and man, the thing is, I meant this. I said, if I had all the money in the world, I could just do whatever I wanted to do. I would go everywhere that would accept me, and I would preach the gospel free of charge for the rest of my life because I just want people to know the God who has changed my life. And man, I meant it. And as I listened to him preach that, I was like, yeah, man, is that passion still here? Or sometimes I think that our passion, it starts to wane, it's almost like it becomes domesticated. Like we're so excited whenever Jesus first changes our life, and then it's just somewhere along the line, other things start to just step in way of our relationship with Jesus and the things that we're going after. And that's how we start to put God on the back burner. Man, is Jesus, is he still your passion? And maybe you're thinking, like, why is it that we struggle? What is it that causes us to lose passion for Jesus? Like, why isn't he my passion? Well, so if I was going to go eat tortellini with blackened chicken, I don't know about you, but I'm one of those guys whenever it comes to eating foods that I shouldn't eat, like potato chips, like before a meal. I could literally eat a full size of family-style potato chip, like the entire bag. I've done it. That's how I know. Like on vacation, I actually ate a full bag of potato chips, family-sized potato chips, and at the end, I was just like, "Oh my fat, what did I just do?" But listen, you want to know what would ruin my experience of going to Los Brisas with my wife? If I was to take a full-size family bag of potato chips and eat all of it about an hour before we got there, I would go there and I would be looking at food thinking, I hate my life and I'm frustrated. My desire that I know is actually there is now limited, and I can no longer take in this goodness because I filled myself with junk food. Now, the question for all of us is, what is your spiritual junk food in your life? Like, what is it that you go after? That you know, then you just start to fill yourself with it, even though you know Jesus is better. And how can you get that out of your life and have your craving be for God because he's better? I met with a guy this week, and he was talking about how, man, he said, my house is known as a party house, and when all my friends got back into town this semester, I got drunk with them just like I always had. And he said, I'd been going to the way for a year and God had been moving in my heart. But I just fell right back into that same old pattern, and I was getting drunk again. And he said the next morning I was eating with somebody, eating some breakfast, and I just said, man, I don't think this is who I want to be anymore. And he said, so I'm not going to go out and get drunk. I'm not going to get drunk when everyone's at our house anymore. I'm just going to stop. And he said week 1 and week 2, he didn't have a beverage. And he said, man, and at this point, he started getting choked up. And he said, you know what was really sad to me? Everybody that came up to me said, man, why don't you have a beer, dude? It's so weird seeing you without a beer in your hand. You always have a beer in your hand. And he said he realized that's just not the guy I want to be, and that's the guy that everyone saw me as. And he said, I've gone 6 to 8 weeks without getting drunk. And he said, man, it's been difficult because everyone comes over, and in the moment, it's good, it looks really appetizing, I want it. But I said, man, have you noticed that there's more joy? And he said, since I've not been getting drunk, he said, absolutely. That's why I keep doing it, because, man, I'm telling you it's better. He was preaching to me. And I was like, amen. What are you saying now? Let's go to the verse you're about to share with me. Let's preach. He's like, man, Jesus is better. He's better for all of us. Man, you hunger for righteousness, there's a promise you will be filled. Will you hunger and thirst for righteousness? As we close tonight, I want to lead us in 4 short prayers based on the passage that we read. So would you bow your head? And would you pray this to God? He says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Man, your blessing will come when you bring your nothing. Would you pray this? Jesus, I bring my nothing to you. Say, blessed are those who mourn. You must be broken to be blessed. Would you say, Jesus, break my heart for what breaks yours? It says, blessed are the meek. those who are vessels for God under his control. Would you say, Jesus, help me be under your control as your vessel. Send me, I'll go. And it says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. You're blessed whenever you hunger for what satisfies. Would you say, Jesus, I pray that you would be the passion of my life. And if you're here and you don't know Jesus, but you feel him calling you, I began this night by talking about the professor that exchanged his grade for the grade of the students. And he said, this is a picture of the grace of God. That Jesus takes every one of our failures and he actually takes them to the cross where he died for us. And he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. He actually prays for our forgiveness while he's dying in our place on the cross. In place of our failure, Jesus says, I will be your perfection. I succeeded every place that you failed. Will you take this offer? And you can say this. You can take his offer tonight. You can say, Jesus, I turn from my sin and turn to you. I accept your offer. Save me. And Jesus will change your life. Let's stand and worship him.